Okay. Brilliant, weird, and profound, telling truths about the modern condition that most novelists today have forgotten or never knew. Autumn Curse, Tablet, Bomb. Frédéric Tcheng by Poor Dollars. Autocritique, Vérité documentée, and The Ghost of Christian Dior, still from Dior and I, courtesy of the artist. The histories of fashion, art, and film often intersect in unexpected ways. I was reminded of this recently while watching Les Enfants Travaux Jean-Pierre Mervet. This novel was 1952 52 film adaptation of Jean Cocteau's classic novel about devious siblings immersed in a private world of games, role-playing, and self-destruction. It's a strange, dark parable of creativity and alienation wrapped in Marvel's stylish production, and notably, the film's opulent costumes were created by Christian Dior, the preeminent romantic post-war designer. Admittedly, his name might have slipped by unnoticed in the credits had I not also recently seen Frédéric Cheng's new documentary Dior and I, Cheng's film, which details the creation of Ralph Simon's first Gothic collection for the house in 2012. It is as much an absorbing, taking clock verite as it is a moody meditation on time and transforms. Throughout, Chan artfully deploys archival footage of deer, often slowed down and paired with an intimate voice-over narration taken from the designer's Milson 1952 memoir. The effect is the effect is haunting and emotional, which is appropriate given that Dear and I is essentially a ghost story. In Chang's film, the house, atelier in particular, is where the drama unfolds. But the house also registers as a kind of psychic space. There, a deeply private man spent his early childhood isolated in a picturesque maison in Normandy, where he immersed himself in the private world of his imagination. Even after he became an international figure in 1947 with the debut of his iconic New Look collection, he remained tethered psychologically, and creatively to this house, preserving it exactly as it had been decades earlier. Its pink and gray palette and flower gardens became signature elements in his designs. One can guess that Dior must have felt some kinship with Cocteau's enfants, who spent their final days hoarded up in an opulent mansion filled with their playthings, prisoners to their private fantasy world. Dior's house, which is now the Christian Dior Museum, makes a critical appearance in Chang's film. Simmons, who has just taken over as artistic director of Dior, is flown by helicopter to visit the estate. Sitting in the garden among Dior's beloved flowers, Simmons admits that he could not continue reading the designer's memoir because the powers were deeply unsettling. Time moves and yet it doesn't. The scene captures what Chang is truly after with Dior and I, the uncanny continuities between artists across time. The 55-year gap between Dior's death and Simon's arrival collapsed in 90 elegant minutes. $4. Dior and I feels very intimate. We are visiting the highly vilified world of haute couture, and yet it's brought alive in your film in a way that's almost tender. Frédéric Tcheng. I was looking for a story and for characters that could make fashion a worthwhile subject for me personally. I wasn't looking to reinforce familiar criticism about the fashion industry. Some people find it hard to imagine a dialogue about fashion that doesn't start or with a mea culpa about the industry since this attitude is very odd to me because it's also an industry filled with hardworking artists. My approach with this film was to focus on their struggles within the system. Whether they are the creative director, the seamstress, or like me, a film director. That's why the film is called Dear and I. The making of the collection and the making of the film happened in Power. You and Ralph each had 8 weeks to produce your debuts. His first couture collection and your first feature documentary as director. Frédéric Tcheng. I knew going in that I wanted to make an ensemble film that focused on Ralph's encounter with the atelier and address the weight of the year's legacy. The 8-week deadline meant that we were going to focus exclusively on one collection. The ticking clock is a classic documentary structure, so it made sense dramatically, but beyond the behind-the-scenes action, I was always on the lookout for something more universal. What's the film about? What's the film about is something that we always ask in film school, and it's something I learned again while working on Valentino, The Last Emperor, 2009, and co-directing Diana Brilland. The eye has to travel. The drama needs to unfold within the characters. That's what I wanted to hone in on with Dior and I. As an editor, I'm used to observing for long periods of time before a story matures in my head. At some point during the shoot, my sound person, whom I've known for years, whose opinion I respect, said, "I don't know where we're going. It seems like you don't have a point of view." It really shook me. Early on, I wanted to shoot everything, and my crew wondered what I was after, but I worked very much by intuition. I have to find the film as I progress. I wait until my heart's beating a little faster. Then I know there is a story that I really care about. You and Ralph each find a personal way of interpreting Dear's history and in a sense reconfiguring the narrative of the house. Ralph has a radical approach to fashion. Unlike other designers, he doesn't start with the surface look of a garment. He starts with its shape. is interested in construction and tailoring, and he wants to change how garments work on the body. In 2012, Ralph is confronted with the challenge of how to interpret the iconic looks people have come to expect from Dior. It was clear that he wanted to concentrate on the first 10 years of the house from 1947 to 57, which is the time when Christian Dior was designing for his first collection. Ralph selects some of the iconic looks and then alters their shape. He pairs Dior's most famous design, the jacket, which is a very sculptured with skinny black contemporary cigarette pants. When Dior first unveiled the bar jacket in 1947, it was a romantic statement against the utilitarian fashions of the Second World War. Ralph's juxtaposition of past and present creates an entirely new silhouette. I realized later that I was trying to do something similar, combining the archival material and voiceover from Christian Dior's memoir with the vérité footage of the athlete today. Today become my way of confronting the past and present in the film. There's a key scene early in the film with the unveiling of the tour. It's our first glimpse at Ralph's take on Dior. Tours are mock-ups of the dresses produced in cheap white fabric. They are unique to haute couture. The name means canvas in French, so it has an obvious painterly association, but it also has a film association. Tour is used colloquially in French to refer to the movie screen, or simply to a movie. This is what gave me the idea to project the archival images on the tours during one section of the film. It was about Ralph's modern designs confronting these ghostly, ethereal images of the past. It speaks not only to Ralph's challenge as a designer, but also to the intersections of fashion and cinema. This confrontation between past and present is also echoed on the film's soundtrack. My editor Julia Perez and I gathered electronic music that conveyed a sense of repetition, modernity, and minimalism. We took our cue from artists that Ralph listened to, such as Plastic Man's Richie Houghton, and other electronic bands like The Knife and the XX. In Power, I worked closely with Hai-Yang Kim, an instrumental composer and cellist who create the score. We were interested in capturing a sense of mystery with the archival footage. We had in mind Johnny Greenwood's score for The Master and a tonal works by Debussy and Schoenberg. We wanted a shifting, unsettling mood that would suggest a ghost story or a thriller. As the film progresses, Hayang's classical score becomes increasingly electronic. It's a subtle shift, but we wanted to convey the sense that Dior's and Ralph's stems converge toward the end. and Ralph's vision becomes more distinctively his own. My friend Omar Verada, who did the voiceover in the film, turned me on to the work of artist Jonah Tofik. Specifically, his concept of untimely collaboration is the idea that artists can collaborate across time and space. That is two-way conversation. The film's voiceover narration is based on Dear by Dear, the designer's 1957 memoir. It was published the year he died. And there's a sense that he is speaking to us from beyond the grave. How did you arrive at the idea of Christian Dior narrating the film in 2009? In 2009, I planned to make a film about my family in China. I wanted to use a voice over my ancestors' stories on top image of contemporary China. The idea was to play with the way it sound and imagine can tell two different stories or respond to the same story. This idea remerged while I was editing Dior and I. I began to think about what it would mean to have Christian Dior narrate the film, to have this voiceover written 55 years ago become a hinge between past and present. At times, it's paired with the archival footage, and sometimes it's heard on top of contemporary image. I discovered Dear by Dear when I began researching the film. For some reason, I was drawn to this slim, gray book at the bottom of a box that I was sent. It's not a glamorous account of all the people knew, all the people Dear knew then, or the Paris he attended. It's a very humble book. He writes about the work and his collaborators. He details the labor and effort required to create a collection, from the initial sketch to the final design. And he writes about how you counsel someone you've upset. This approach inspired me to focus on the human experience of the creative process. When I reread passages during the shoot, I often felt as though I were reading a description of exactly what I'd witnessed that day. The process and emotions were the same, despite the half-century gap in time. In the book, Deere describes an introspective struggle between his private self and his public image. Is a theme that you explore in Dior and I. It was the other aspect that drew me to the book. The idea of a public image is that you're not physically present, but people experience you. Dior found public exposure uncomfortable and ultimately alienating. Alienating. Ralph is also someone who's resisting it, and my film is, in part, about his journey into the spotlight. That's why I use the camera flash as a motif throughout the film. For me, the ending of a film when Ralph is mobbed by the paparazzi after the show is scary. Facing a wall of cameras like that can be an out-of-body experience. At the moment, Ralph's life has changed forever, and this transformation comes with the uneasiness of exposure. I hope this comes across in the film. Of course, this puts me in a contradictory position. On one hand, I'm lamenting the culture of publicity. On the other, I'm subjecting love to it by making the film. But his reaction to the film has helped me come to terms with it. He's been very supportive in his own private manner. Ralph visits Christian Dior's home in Normandy. Sitting in the garden, he talks about reading the memoir and admits that he couldn't continue. The song belongs to his own experience was too unsettling, too uncanny. Ralph has a complicated relationship with Christian Dior as artistic director. He's required to channel Dior's spirit. At the same time, he must remain himself. Perhaps more so than he's ever been. This was Ralph's first couture collection for one of the most esteemed houses in fashion. The pressure was enormous. While shooting the film, I was fascinated with trying to find the similarities between Ralph and Leo. I was interested in this idea of a reincarnation, but when I talked with my editor Julio Perez, he said we have to find their differences. It was a breakthrough for me. I realized the Ralph's real struggle was how to remain Ralph Simmons in the midst of taking on this role. It became a story like Hitchcock's Rebecca. The house is haunted, and the character must emancipate himself from the ghost. How do you feel the film has affected him? I've noticed that he's been exploring ideas of exposure and privacy in his work since the film. In June 2014, he presented a menswear collection under his own label that included several family pictures printed on the garments. There were images of his parents falling in love and portraits of himself in his early 20s. I've also noticed how he has delved into the past lately at Deer, particularly the 60s and the 70s, as if to challenge what he said in the film about the past not being romantic to him. I don't think it's a contradiction. I see him as an artist who's constantly redefining himself. It's clear that the film is not simply a portrait of Ralph Simmons. We spend a lot of time in the atelier, getting to know the artist and learning about the craft. The two premiere Florence Sheche and Monique Bailey are especially vivid characters. The atelier, the atelier was the very first place we went when we started shooting. We tried to keep their point of view and not get caught up with the usual hierarchy of the fashion world. They have the seamstresses are very direct and accessible. They were wary at first. They told us TV crews come and go, and we never see the result. It reminded me that I had a responsibility towards them as subjects. It was humbling, even though I told them I was trying to make a theatrical feature. They didn't really believe me until they saw the film in Paris last summer. It was great to see the film through their eyes, but it was also a big test. I think they recognized themselves and liked the film, which was a big relief for me. How did you reconcile in your own mind the degree to which the camera affected the ability that you were seeking to portray? Frederick Wiseman was certainly a cinematic reference point. I saw Crazy Horse just before I started shooting. It's a film I really admire. He takes you behind the scenes of the famous erotic Paris dance review, and it's an institutional portrait. But it's very different stylistically from his other films. There's more attention paid to the film's visual construction. You see this especially in how Weissman photographs the dance sequence. There's a sense of pleasure in it. You sense him indulging, and the results are quite beautiful. Obviously, Dior and I is not a Weissman film. I'm more inclined to capture an emotional landscape and how characters transform. Recently, I found a Scorsese quote in which he describes the merciless camera as an inquisitive presence, but also a loving presence, an emphatic presence, attuned to the most sensitive emotional vibrations. I guess that's something I strive to do. When I sent the rough cut of my film, I wrote a note that said, in order for me to make a film, I really need to fall in love with the subjects and the world I'm filming. There's been conversation recently about very films in the age of selfies. Is it still possible to make observational films when people are so used to performing for the camera? Richard Brody, in a New Yorker piece on the Maceless, points out the overrated documentary are essentially participatory. I've been thinking about what it means for me in many ways. I'm very old-fashioned, and I believe in very documentary filmmaking. That being said, Ralph is a reluctant protagonist. With Dior and I, the camera is, in part, the subject of the film. Paul Dallas is a Brooklyn-based writer and programmer with a background in architecture. His writing has appeared in Art Forum, Filmmaker, CinemaScope, Interview, and IndieWire. He has created programs for the Guggenheim, Mail Cinema, Times Square Arts, and Van Allen Institute. Au revoir!